So there you are, standing in line at a coffee shop or sitting in a waiting room, and you get the thought to speak to the person next to you. You think, yes, I'm going to be social and I'm going to speak to this stranger. You think of one thing to say, and then another, and then another. And now all of a sudden your palms get all sweaty and you feel afraid to say something to this person. What if they think I'm weird? What if my voice cracks? What if I run out of things to say? Minute after minute passes, and eventually you don't even speak to the person. You walk away feeling so stupid, like, why didn't I just speak to them? I had nothing to be afraid of. What was I so afraid of to speak to this person? I used to be this way in conversations too. I used to overthink just like you do and just end up not speaking to anybody. And then I'd go home and beat myself up thinking, why was I so afraid to say something? What was I so scared of that I avoided speaking to this person or these other people? And I would really truly resolve that the next time I left the house, I was going to go speak to people. But then the next time to leave the house came, and just like the time before, I'd freeze up and I wouldn't speak to anyone like I said I was going to. I was like this for a really long time, and I would be the guy in the room who was with like just two other people and totally should have spoke to them, but didn't, and just like made it awkward by pulling out his phone and pretending to check his messages, even though no one has messaged me. I just like opened the weather app and randomly look at the weather app, or like randomly look at the Instagram posts. I think it wasn't until just this spring that I started to really open up and started to speak to strangers. I started being able to speak to whoever I walked by on the street or in the grocery store or the gym, and I ended up being able to hold really, really good small talk with just anyone that I was around. It didn't really matter where I was. I remember there was one instance that kind of like I realized how far I had come with my social skills, and it was this moment where there was a dude in King Soopers who was like looking at this patio table and chairs set, and I like went over and just like randomly sat next to him and just like had a quick like funny conversation with him about like, oh, this looks nice, like you gotta be in your backyard with the trees and you gotta have a beer in your hand or whatever. And that like blew my mind, and something I couldn't even dream of 1 or 2 years ago has become my reality. I'm not afraid to speak to anyone. I don't overthink when I talk to people, and I can do what I always dreamed of being able to do, and that's that I can have zero inner dialogue and just be present and enjoy myself in whatever social situation I'm in. Now, in this video, I'm going to explain in specific detail how I overcame my awkwardness in conversations and my fear of speaking to other people, and was able to become that super socially confident Chad who just speaks to everyone around him. A massive fear that I used to have with speaking to other people was that I thought, what if other people are weirded out by what I say? What if I say something and the other person is weirded out by me? But I just kind of had to realize, like, number one, no one's gonna think what I say is quote unquote weird. Like, when was the last time that somebody said something to you and you were consciously thinking about like how weird on a scale of 1? You have like this meter in your brain that's like measuring how weird it is. It's like a pressure gauge of like, in the green is like it's not very weird, in the red it's like super weird. When was the last time you did some bullshit like that? Never. I don't think you've ever done that before. And number two, it's actually that I was just insecure about myself. And it's not that I was really afraid of other people's judgments of me. It's just that I needed to have more compassion on myself. A rule with social anxiety that I kind of figured out is that I think I either figured this out reading The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck or Models. Those are both by the author Mark Manson. I don't remember which one it was, but I do remember learning that with social anxiety, it's not that other people are actually thinking the things about you that you're afraid that they are. It's that any socially anxious thought you get is actually an insecurity that you have that you're projecting onto your perceived judgments that others have of you. That'll put you into a whole new perspective going into a social situation. Because now when you think these socially anxious thoughts, it's going to be so weird. You're not going to, it's just going to take such power away from it. You're going to be like, no one is actually thinking these things about me. This is just me being insecure about myself. And so a huge key with overcoming social anxiety, it's not in overcoming your fear of judgment of other people. It's actually in being more compassionate and kind to yourself and overcoming insecurities that you have about yourself. I think one of these insecurities that I had as far as conversations are concerned is one of the things that really shaped the way that I saw conversations. And a thing that really embedded an insecurity in conversation with me was what happened with me and my older brother when we were younger. He was pretty A-type when we were younger. And he would just like randomly pick at me for like the way I pronunciated the P in airplane, or like randomly get mad at me for talking about certain subjects or saying certain things the wrong way. And so I think that planted a seed of insecurity in me to where I assumed that was how everyone else was going to treat me in conversations. Now, I'm not saying this to criticize my brother. I love my brother to absolute death. This is something that we've actually talked about. The reality ended up being that, yeah, I was just insecure about myself. It wasn't my fear of judgment from other people that I needed to overcome. It was my lack of self-love and self-compassion, and that I needed to overcome the insecurity in myself. No one actually thought that deeply about what I said. I like the phrase, "it's not that deep." Anytime I'm like overthinking in conversation, I'll just kind of say that term to myself, and that generally helps to straighten me out. I was just saying that I needed to be more kind to myself and have more compassion with myself. And a branch off of that is that I needed to be kind to myself and allow myself to speak. It was only ever my own negative self-judgments that held me back in conversation. And so like I said before, it was not that I needed to overcome my fear of judgment from other people, but that I needed to have compassion on myself and allow myself to speak. So I started making the habit of reminding myself of that. Anytime I was in a conversation and I thought of something to say, I would remind myself, allow yourself to speak. And then I would just say whatever was on my heart. And I'll tell you what, there has never been one moment, not one, where I have said one of these weird things that my mind tells me I'm gonna say. You know when you're thinking about something to say and your mind kind of randomly gives you the intuition like, what if they think you're weird? But then if you just question yourself like, okay, like what? Like what? What am I going to say that's going to be so weird that I'm going to be completely socially rejected for saying? And it shuts your mind down because it doesn't have any rational argument. It doesn't have anything rational to tell you that's going to be quote unquote weird to say. It's not a rational thought. In fact, the exact opposite has happened when I've said whatever's on my mind. People have liked me more for just saying whatever is in my head. Why? Because it's authentic. It's not thought through and cooked up for effect. It's just whatever is on my heart and mind. The key to charisma that I've spoken about before on my channel is authenticity. And so saying whatever is on my heart and in my mind is what's truly most charismatic. It may not be such a case of being afraid to speak to people that you have, but of not having anything to speak about. Part of having good conversation is having interesting things to speak about. If you want to have those deeper conversations with people that actually like carry on for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, and are super in-depth and interesting, then you have to have interesting things to talk about. You got to talk about that time you and your friends almost burnt something down. You need to mention that cool new thing about working out that you have learned, and then talk about how that can help them in their exercise journey. You need to be able to relate the cool experiences you've had and the cool things that you're learning about to others if you want to have these deeper conversations with people. Because let's be real, no one cares about the badge that you just earned in Call of Duty. No one cares about the meme that you saw at 3 a.m. People want to hear about the cool and interesting things that you've done. That's a big one for dates, actually. If you go on a date with a girl, she doesn't want to hear about the video games that you play. She wants to hear about the fun things that you do, the funny and interesting stories that you have. People talk about like, how do you talk to girls? Have things to talk about with them. Have interesting things that you've done. You like randomly went on this really long bike ride with a couple of your friends one day and you guys like went over this big hill and you almost crashed. You went through like this pile of muddy water and you guys got all muddy and it was a blast. You gotta have interesting things to talk about. That goes for women and for other people, but that's kind of a side note for women actually, is like when you're on a date with a girl, how do you not run out of things to say? How do you speak to them? You gotta have things that you've done to be able to talk about. And that's the answer that you're not gonna want to hear, but it's the answer that you need to hear. And it's the answer that's going to really help you in the long run. So in my experience of like developing interesting things to talk about, I found that 1, self-improvement will make you more interesting. Working on yourself will give you these cool little niche experiences that no one else has had, that other people will find to be really, really interesting to hear about. And if you're really, really smart with your self-improvement, then you're going out and you're socializing with other people, and then you can relate those experiences you've had of like that weird, rude person at Starbucks when you were standing in line, or like that really funny dude that you met when you were waiting to get on the bus. And the second thing is that reading books will make you more interesting. You may not think that like reading a psychology or self-improvement book will necessarily make you more interesting. Yeah, it'll make you better. It'll make you understand self-improvement and understand yourself and better yourself more. But how is it really going to make you interesting? You'd be really surprised. Even if the other person that you're speaking to doesn't fully understand psychology or self-improvement, they'll still see you as this another copy paste of every fucking alpaca head dude out here who goes to school, plays video games, maybe works out, maybe has a sport that he plays, but doesn't really have anything cool or unique or interesting about him. And by the way, I'm not telling you that you need to be the most special individual ever. I think it's foolish to try to be so incredibly interesting and special to everybody around you all the time, and to be this dude that's like, he's rich and he's the most handsome and all that bullshit. But you do need to still do interesting things if you want to have good conversations with people. Even if it's the simplest shit, like you go on a hike with some friends. You guys go and randomly explore a random place downtown that looks like kind of dark and almost a little bit scary. You go explore that weird abandoned house that's over in the farm area that's nearby you. It can be really, really simple things. It doesn't have to be Lamborghinis and fancy dinners and all that. The title of this section may have confused you a little bit because I'm saying to be super interesting and super boring. Like, what the fuck? What is wrong with you? That doesn't make sense. At first glance, it doesn't make sense whatsoever. I don't blame you. But let me explain what I mean. You want to be interesting in order to have... What the hell is even that? Excuse me. You want to be interesting in order to have those deeper conversations with people. Like when you sit down with somebody and you want to get to know them better, you want to be able to have those interesting things to talk about in like an hour and a half long conversation, right? But in just a passing conversation, when it's just you passing by someone, passing by an employee in a store, passing by a random dude on the street, I say be boring because you don't want to overthink what to say to someone. For example, if you're ordering food at a fast food place and you might want to strike up a conversation with the employees, don't sit there and you don't have to come up with something special to say. It's not that deep. Just say, like I do, so have you guys been busy today?
That's boring as fucking all get out.
That's it. I think of it as having the most brain dead conversations. Turn off 50% of your brain, and like I said earlier in the video, just say whatever is on your mind. It's okay to say, the weather is really nice today, huh? Or, man, it's really quiet in here. Have you guys been slow today? We don't have to be so conscious all the time. We don't have to be trying to have the most spectacular interactions and the most best, fun, happy, glamorous time. Turn off 50% of your brain. Be 50% dumber than you are. Because there's someone out there who's kind of enjoying life more than you. Not because there's something better about him than you, but just because he's not consciously walking around overthinking and overanalyzing everything all the time. Like the random dickheads who you'll see who will have like really pretty girlfriends who they themselves look like a dork, but they have a really pretty girlfriend with them. It's because they turned off 50% of their brain and said the most brain dead bullshit to this girl. They didn't sit there and overthink and overanalyze what to say and what if I run out of things to say and all this bullshit that we do. They just randomly said some bullshit to her. So turn off 50% of your brain and say the most brain dead thing. I think there's this weird thing online where we've like kind of learned that like you're not supposed to talk about the weather. That's not interesting. And it's like, it kind of makes sense in the context of like a date. A girl doesn't want to talk about the weather with you, obviously. But in these situations, you gotta quit trying to be so high speed and conscious all the time. Just say the most brain dead thing that comes to your mind. Again, I say be boring because it makes you relatable to people. You can be that guy that like, he took the time out of his day to say hello and actually strike up a conversation with them. And then they go home and they're actually thinking about that interaction for the next like 2 days. And it made them so happy that you did that. Scroll down and click on the subscribe button. Shut out the noise. Do the work. Mwah.